Welcome everyone back to Rocks for Jocks. Today we're going to do something a little bit different. Today we're going to have a bonus episode talking about MrBeast, who is a famous YouTuber, and his whole business that he uses to run that channel. We're not going to do anything science related at all today, as it's a bonus episode and a super long one, so that's all right. Before we get too deep into things, I want to acknowledge that this recording was made with my friend Colin in the same room, and I gave my guest the better microphone. For whatever reason, the microphone I was using that day decided to have some audio issues. I fixed this up as best I could during the editing process, but you may still hear a few echoes and missing words and weird sounds coming from the recording itself. The great news is that after the recording, I went and bought a new audio interface, so hopefully this is the one and only time this ever happens. All opinions are our own and are not meant to reflect the views of our employers or any other kind of financial advice in the real world. Without further ado, enjoy the episode. I'm here with the Colin Vergilio again. Most accordingly, in the last 8 or 9 months since I had you on, both of us have gotten engaged, which I somehow have not mentioned on here yet.
We're getting married to people that are way cooler than we are.
Oh, but sorry. Yes, we've gotten engaged to other people, not each other, if that wasn't clear.
I didn't even think about that.
Yeah. Okay, so we're going to talk.
I'm moving on.
So today we're going to talk about this guy, MrBeast, who's a famous YouTuber and runs a whole giant business now, over 500 employees. So we're going to talk about him, his business, and a memo which leaked from his company recently, which he gives to internal employees about how his business operates and how he wants his employees to operate as well. So why do we care about this guy? MrBeast's channels get hundreds of millions of views per month. He has well over 50 billion views total across YouTube at this point, and even more if you're counting TikTok and Instagram and everything else. So even if you don't know who he is, he definitely has a real impact to millions of not only Americans, but people all around the world. The way Colin described it to me is kind of 3 camps of people. People who have either never heard of this guy. The second group is people who have heard of him and maybe watched him a handful of times, which I'm guessing you and I kind of fall into. And then the third is people who are deeply engaged with a lot of his content, subscribe to his channels and like all his videos and things like that.
Yeah. He is the most popular YouTuber in the world. And to give you a sense of just the scale of that, more people watch one of his YouTube videos than a Super Bowl commercial. He has a net worth of $500 million is estimated. And his media company, MrBeast Productions, reportedly makes $700 million of revenue per year. So what's happening underneath the surface here? What is this new media company? How does it work? Why does it exist? What has happened in the world where a company like this that is so radically different from every other traditional media company out there, how has it come to be? And how has it achieved such monumental scale in a way that no one else has achieved?
Yeah, I think that was a great, fun intro you gave right there. One thing I did want to note before we get too into the weeds here is that MrBeast has a handful of pending lawsuits against him. So we're not going to talk about any of those allegations. I have no idea what's true or not. We're not here to glorify or demonize the person, but we are here to examine the business and primarily take a look at that memo and how maybe that affects the business.
Yeah. And I mean, you put it well. This is a guy that is not without controversy. You'll see as we get more into the memo, but he's very big on experimentation, fast and loose. Everything he does is documented online. And so there have been allegations of a toxic workplace, enabling harassment, discriminatory language, proof points for some of those, recent allegations of crypto fraud. But really what's more interesting is, you know, the landscape around YouTube and why an organization like this exists today beyond the person.
Okay. Yeah. He comes out with around one video per month is what I was seeing, maybe every 3 to 4 weeks on his main YouTube channel, the one with something like 100 million subscribers.
320 million subscribers.
Thank you. 320 million subscribers. Each video gets around or over 100 million views on that main channel, which is around the number of people that watch the Super Bowl every year. And then he also has, I think, around 20 or 25 alternate channels owned by his business that are either clips of the main channel or they're being translated into other languages. So, for example, he has this giant Spanish channel because he hires really famous Spanish actors to voice over what everything that him and his friends do. So people will say, oh, I want to listen to this famous Spanish actor narrating someone who spent 50 days in a grocery store, something like that.
Yeah, I mean, to me, the stat of why does this guy matter? The population of the United States is currently 346 million people. Mr. Beast himself has 325 million subscribers and is growing quickly. So by the time you may be listening to this, Mr. Beast may have beaten out the United States in terms of reach. And if that doesn't tell you just how many people are deeply engaged with this guy's content on a regular basis, I don't know what will.
Yeah. And it's hard to see that impact in the lives of a lot of adults because, as you said, as we were talking about earlier, there's so many people who don't engage at all, or so many people who tangentially follow him. Yeah, it's just an interesting mix. And then with regards to the videos that he actually makes, I think you said, I forget if you either did this yourself or you found someone online who categorized it well, that he has kind of 3 main categories of videos: stunts, buying stuff, or giving away, where the giveaways include a bunch of competitions as well.
I mean, the distinctive aspect of his content is the giveaway videos. The giveaway videos are what acted as the fuel to his rise to his current level and are still a major part of what he does today and what differentiates his media.
Yeah.
One thing I did want to hit on, you were talking a little bit about who his audience is and, who is he reaching? The memo was great for this, actually. He gave us a view into the back end of who his audience is. And obviously YouTube's not perfect in terms of gathering this information, but I think it's a helpful window. So just going through his audience, 70% of his audience in the last month are male. Interestingly, 8% are in the 13 to 17 years old category. The largest category by far is 18 to 24 years old at 33%. The second largest category is 35 to 44 years old at 24%.
But then he goes on right after that to say that he thinks his target audience, I think he phrases it as teenage memers, like teenagers who are chronically online kind of thing. And mostly, I assume men. But yeah, that directly contradicts the statistics. So I almost wonder if those are the people who are engaging with his content more in terms of liking and subscribing. So even though he may technically get more views from people in their 30s, maybe just more people younger interacting with it, commenting and sharing with friends kind of thing. Or alternatively, if there's younger people who just listen longer, like people who are 18, 20 years old might sit through 10 minutes of the 20-minute video, whereas someone who's 30 may watch 30 seconds and then decide they'd rather watch football highlights.
Yeah, I think he puts it well of saying, our content is consumed by everyone, and you could have a kid watching a video with their mom, and that'll be picked up differently. He has a worldwide audience. I think the core part here is who he defines as his audience. So he's making videos for this teenage memer that likes video games, and that's the core of his identity, which really shines through across all his videos. But that doesn't mean that's the only person that's consuming them. He started with a niche, and it's interesting because his virality is so strong with what he's built, this engine in the back end that we're going to explore, that he can reach audiences that he's not even intending to reach. These videos, they're goofy, outlandish, hyperbolic with really what they're trying to do. I mean, just to read off some of the themes of his episodes. He did a $456,000 Squid Game in real life. He buried himself alive for 50 hours. He bought an island, and then in another video, he gave it away. Like, it's intentionally made to just grab the attention, be goofy, definitely concepts that are just out there and can allure to kids, but end up finding a broader audience, intentionally or not, beyond that core demographic that he's making these videos for. You want to touch on like the history and just like where he came from?
Yeah, how he got here. I'll let you start. I think you have maybe a little better grasp on his personal background, and then I have a story I want to jump in with at some point. Do you want to kick that off?
Yeah, I think it's important to understand where he came from. So MrBeast, his name's actually James Donaldson, Jimmy Donaldson, as he goes by. He was born in 1998.
Wait, he's younger than us?
Yeah, don't you feel old?
That's a problem. Okay, go on.
He was born in Wichita, Kansas, and then raised in Greenville, North Carolina, where most of MrBeast Productions actually is still centered today. The core of what it started as was really this obsession and dedicated to YouTube as a platform. He was forced out of his family home after he decided to drop out of college because he wanted to focus on making YouTube videos. The guy was, from the beginning, this dedicated to figuring out YouTube.
So I have a quick story. I watched an interview he did maybe a year or two ago on Logan Paul's podcast, where Jimmy said that his parents were forcing him to go to community college, and he was totally not an academically focused person. So he told them he was going to class. He would bring his laptop and sit in his car all day long and either watch or record for edit YouTube videos for like 8 or 10 hours straight, and then drive home and be like, yep, I did class, and then I went to the library, did homework, and now I'm home for the night. So that was his way of staying at home a little bit longer until that's like semester was over or something, when he wanted to like jump into YouTube full force. But obviously you can't live on your own at 18 with zero income.
He was laser focused on decoding YouTube and decoding virality. And so I think it's helpful context that this was around, what, 2014?
No, because he's younger than us. So this would have been, he's really
2016 then.
Yeah.
Okay, so this was around 2016. This was at an age, I mean, the year of 2016, for those of us who are chronically online, that was around the Harambe Renaissance. We went from broad-based virality and meme culture and started to get more specific, and virality as a mechanism was becoming engineered as people realized the value and power of the reach of some of these platforms. And so Jimmy early was hyper-focused on being a part of that and figuring out what made YouTube tick as a platform. He dug into the YouTube algorithms to figure out why certain videos made it to the top, how they spread, and how you hit those top numbers. His rise to fame was driven by hyperbolic stunts that were made to grab attention. He counted to 100,000 was the main video that propelled him, and it took him 40 hours to do. The video itself, what was it, 24 hours? Truly insane, silly.
Yeah, I think he had to cut it down from 40 hours to 24 because YouTube only lets you put up 24-hour videos.
Yeah, and so he sped it up, made it consumable, and from there just kept going after more and more of these stunts. How he rose to fame is at the core of the DNA of how the platform works today. He still has the same flashy headlines. He reportedly spends $1 million to produce every video through production value and through giveaways that are a part of these videos. And he is now at scale. He has over 500 people, according to LinkedIn, that work for MrBeast Productions.
Yeah. And I know we've given kind of a long background on this guy and his company, but I think it's important to get a sense of the scale of what he's doing here, whether people like it or not, the influencers are some of the biggest celebrities in the world right now. And this, 27-year-old guy made himself into one of them.
That is true. I view his success through a slightly different lens. By doing so, was able to benefit from the massive tailwinds that YouTube has seen over the last decade. YouTube annual users in 2014 were at 1 billion. Today, they're over 2.5 billion. So the platform has over doubled. 70% of watch time is due to YouTube's advanced recommendation algorithm. The algorithm decides, more likely than not, what you're going to be watching next. By figuring out how to game these algorithms to be put in front of the widest audience of people, MrBeast has effectively hijacked the massive user base of YouTube as a distribution mechanism. And he is the most effective in the world at it. He is the largest YouTube channel in the world at this point.
Yeah, absolutely. You want to move on to the memo here? What are you thinking?
Yeah, I love this memo. And so a little bit of background on this.
Where did you find this? Because you sent this to me, 2 weeks ago?
Yeah, so this was leaked and made its way around the headlines. This memo was meant to be shared internally.
Did it just get leaked 2 weeks ago?
About a month ago, I believe. So this memo was leaked in September 2024. And it basically detailed to employees at MrBeast Productions what was expected of them to be successful. And in a very, very scattered way, touches on why MrBeast Productions has been successful. The reason for creating this memo in the first place is to make sure that everyone is effective as possible at scale.
Yeah, that's perfect. So I'm going to jump into the memo and highlight some of the bullet points on things I thought were interesting or funny or controversial, intentionally or not intentionally. I think maybe I just hit on those and you feel free to interrupt me. The first thing he does is kind of put a bunch of disclaimers at the beginning in a pretty casual way of like, this is not a rule book. You take everything with a grain of salt. But at the same time, he also says people should be reading that memo over and over and internalizing it and making videos the way that he wants to.
Yeah, Jimmy does a great job at grabbing attention early. It's actually a core of what he points out in the memo of why videos are successful. And he actually does it himself in this memo. One of the first things you'll read, it says, if you read this book and pass a quiz, I'll give you $1,000. Sorry Sorry in advance for all the run-on sentences and grammar issues. I'm a YouTuber, not an author, haha. And I think that is actually like the thesis for this entire piece. Sorry, I'm a YouTuber, not an author. I'll give you $1,000 if you pay attention.
And then in writing, haha.
He's not lying, by the way. There are typos all over this thing. Run-on sentences. Some things are capitalized, some are not. In a very endearing way. Yeah, I mean, clearly there's some things in here where he's just repeating to himself over and over of, hey, work harder. And it really underscores a lot of what his expectations are.
Which is fair as well. Like you do need to, sometimes people need to be told multiple times to get the same point across.
Yeah. I think the entire memo itself does not have a lot of structure. You can read it top to bottom and have a good sense for what MrBeast Productions is like as an organization. But still, if you read it top to bottom and try to repeat back what was just said to you, your thoughts will sound scattered. And
yeah. We tried to sit down before the recording and talk about the order in which we wanted to discuss topics in the memo. And we ended up saying there is no order. Let's just go through it and see what happens.
We can do our best to add some structure. I think a good place to touch on, and I'd love to hear your thoughts around it, is just around the content itself, because the content is at the core of MrBeast Productions. It's all about this idea of engineered virality.
Sure. So in a broad sense, he gives 3 metrics that really matter. Click-through rate, which is the percent of times that people click on your video when seeing it. The second metric he gives is average view duration. Pretty self-explanatory, just the number of minutes that people watch each of your videos, and average view percent. is the third metric, which is the percent of your video that each person watches on average. The idea is to maximize all three of those metrics, which means people clicking on your video as frequently as possible and people watching your video for as long as possible. Jimmy says you need to make their thumbnails as attention grabbing as possible so people click on them. And you want the videos to stay incredibly interesting for as long as possible from the beginning onwards. Is that about right?
Yeah. And I think, this goes back to why I think this memo was so neat. He clearly has spent years as a student of this algorithm and why it works and how it works. And he's been able to reduce it down to a few main things that matter. And so MrBeast Productions itself, through a couple degrees of abstraction, is machinery built around grabbing and keeping human attention through any means possible.
Sorry, I need to just acknowledge for a second.
What is going on there?
There's like 15 children outside our windows screaming right now.
Please ignore the sound of children screaming. We promise that's not coming from Alex's basement.
Yeah. It's usually super quiet in this room, and then maybe once a month to get like a group of kids in the backyard here, or somebody else's backyard that's connected to ours. It has a little tree house, and there's like 15 kids that just jumped in and started running around screaming. So hopefully microphones don't pick that up too much and Colin doesn't get too distracted.
We should open up the window and ask them what they think about MrBeast, all of these 6-year-olds running around.
Yeah. All right. Getting back, I'd love to hit a couple of the specifics that I found in the document and kind of get your take on them.
Yeah.
The first one that pops up a couple pages in is about how Jimmy's goal is to make the best YouTube videos possible. He specifically says, paraphrasing this a little bit here, not the best produced videos, not the funniest videos, not the best looking videos, not the highest quality videos, just to make the best YouTube videos possible. Before I give my take, what do you think about that?
I think it's at the core of why he's been successful. The headline is literally, IDC, I don't care how traditional media does things. He then goes into talking about how this is not Hollywood. I don't care how Hollywood does things. He doesn't really seem to be interested at all in hiring anyone with Hollywood experience to tell him how he's supposed to do things, because this man has grown up with YouTube as the core of how he thinks about creating content. And so to inject the way Hollywood thinks about content would actually poison the focus that he's had and why he's been successful. And so you can look at saying like, hey, this is a really non-traditional organization. It seems freelancy. It doesn't seem organized the way I would expect a media organization be organized. My take on it is that the businesses that are built around YouTube as a platform or other distributed, decentralized social media platforms at scale will look more like MrBeast and less like what we've seen previously.
Yes. I think everything you said there is technically correct. It is correct. I think right around page 3 or 4 is where I started to find myself having like a big philosophical difference with the way I make podcasts, and even some of my short form content that I make with like YouTube Shorts and Instagram Reels is like super different than what they're doing. And again, I guess you call it a philosophical difference, because I'm not trying to make mine the most viral clips possible. I'm not trying to make mine the most viral 10-minute videos possible.
100%. And I think you hit on a great point there, that his stated goal is to make the best YouTube videos possible. He also, maybe without even realizing it, has internalized a very opinionated definition of what best is. If you hear admiration in the way that I talk about it, I think it is more that this man has shown a relentless focus on doing one particular thing over a long period of time. And that focus has resulted in the broadest viewership any media organization like his has ever seen. This raises a philosophical question that we can get into of, is this quality content? Is this what we want to see more of?
The answer is we don't get a choice. This man has 320 million followers or subscribers. We will see more of this.
He has figured out how to engineer the attention of people with the help of the YouTube algorithm to reach the widest audience and to continue reaching a wider audience.
And he's done the best in the world.
And he is the best in the world at that.
Or his company is done.
This company is the best in the world at that. And so I think by studying the way he's done things, I think it tells you a lot about what the algorithms value and what they will continue to value over time. So it's not a subjective statement of, oh, like, I like this piece of content. I don't know if it's clear. I actually don't watch a lot of MrBeast videos, but it is the content that the YouTube algorithm has decided we will see more of. And back to that stat of 70% of YouTube video watch time is dictated by their recommendation algorithm. Once you've solved the algorithm, then that's what people will be watching. That's what the vast majority of people will be watching. And so it's not a question of, should media companies look like this in the future, but it's almost like Darwinian, right? Like the ones that survive and reach the broadest audiences will look like this, unless the core algorithms change.
Yeah, well, I'm trying to figure out where the chicken and the egg starts, I guess. If people change their viewing habits, I'm curious how quickly the algorithm itself changes as well.
I guess flipping this question on its head, if you wanted to create a new MrBeast today, like a new production company, what would the primary barriers be? And I think there are a few key aspects of what he currently has at scale that are difficult to replicate. One of them is branding, of course, which is him at the center of all of these videos.
He acting in videos almost daily across all the different channels, I think, right? Maybe not quite daily, but several times a week he's recording stuff.
Yeah. So it's all centered around him and a particular brand, a particular type of video. That in itself is partially valuable. Another piece is the process power of he knows how to create these videos quickly with velocity so that he will continue to gain a following. Alex, I'm sure you feel this as a content producer. Just to be able to operationalize and get a video or a podcast off the ground takes a lot of time. MrBeast Productions is a organization that is running all the time to continually produce more content. In the memo, it even states, I want you working on multiple videos, multiple ideas at a time for every person. And there are 500 people in the organization. So the machine keeps pumping, and it's going to be hard for any upstart organization to catch up with that. Mm-hmm. And then as a result of that, MrBeast Productions gets to take advantage of scale. So you see that with the giveaway videos that he has, right? Of the man bought and gave away an island. Who else can do that?
Yeah, I need to clarify that. There are going to be people who hear this and have never, my parents might hear this and have no idea who this person is. Yes, he will buy $1 million or a $5 million, in some cases, island, record on it for a day or two for whatever they want to do in the video, and then just give it away to somebody. And then that person has to deal with what the hell to do with a private island in the Bahamas.
Yeah. I mean, the thoughtfulness behind the scenes is not always the aim of these giveaway videos. It is intentionally crafted where I have these resources. I can use them to create a really flashy headline. He has a team of, is it dozens? At least dozens of creatives that are just constantly thinking of how do we use these resources and translate that into eyeballs.
Yeah, absolutely. The next thing I made a note of that I think he made a note of as well was that I only want A players, and goes on to talk about A players versus B players, and C players, just basically people who put in the most amount of work produce the most amount of content in a disproportionate way. I made a note of that, and you made a note of that as well. So we're both kind of in alignment on that holding true across companies that we've worked for or just clubs and different organizations we've been a part of?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's really important. And I think it's one of the key ways if you look at, Hollywood and how traditional media organizations are organized versus how this organization is organized. There isn't much management that seems to be going on here. There's a lot of individual responsibility of if you have a task, and even if that task feeds into a larger vision, it is on you to do the orchestration yourself and to make it work.
Yeah. You had a whole section about if you hire a contractor, that's totally fine. They'll pay for it all. But you need to manage that contractor and you need to message them every single day, be on the phone with them every single day, making sure that they're getting their own tasks done. Is that, I'm guessing, the direction you're going?
Yeah. And if you think about, and it's like, that's great. I think it's important to think of the counterfactual here of, how else can you do it? And it's how organizations are typically built, with managers at the core of what is the engine of the organization, of someone else being responsible for orchestrating someone that is actually producing the work. And I think what they've done at MrBeast Productions is flip that on its head and say, hey, it's actually up to you to figure out how the pieces work together. And you don't need someone else to be harping over your work. It's your responsibility. And so understand the organization, understand what you're doing and how it fits into the bottlenecks, and to make sure that everything meshes. And so you remove some more of the need for this organizational hierarchy. And the most efficient organization in the world at getting eyeballs currently does not prioritize managers.
Yeah, that's a funny way to think about it. But what's the next thing you want to touch on here?
Let's talk a little bit about operations and turning anything into content. I think what we were just talking about empowering the individual, translates really well into the operations itself. One of the quotes that I picked out from the memo, we pivot a lot. Be ready to have everything flipped on its head at a moment's notice, LOL. We aren't stuck in any old ways of thinking, and you can literally turn anything into content. It's said so succinctly, but I think, again, it's just indicative of the way this organization thinks about getting views, of the only way that we're going to have the most compelling content is if we can basically truth seek to whatever we think will get more views. And so you start with the skeleton of, wouldn't it be interesting if, and you start with the headline, and then you kind of work backwards from there. Yeah. You don't have a script. You have a script, I would imagine.
It's very loose. Like there's no moral of the story that they're working towards in some of these scripts.
You need to stay nimble. It's 10 minutes of content at a time, and arguably it needs to be half of that.
Some of them are like 20 minutes.
That's wild.
And like trying to keep a positive tone here because I feel like I'm starting to get a little negative. Like a lot of them are 15 or 20 minutes long, and as you said, they could easily be cut down to 2 or 3 minutes tops, but they find a way to fill that space with other stuff. So it's kind of looking in those gaps to seeing what else they fill in. What I found was both of us watched a couple of these videos in advance. I think one of the first times I just kind of sat down and intentionally watched his videos. One of them, I think the premise of the video was they spent a day on an island that cost them $1, then an island that cost them $100, onward and upward until they got to an island that cost them $100 million. They didn't actually buy it, but they still spent a day on it or something. And on one of these islands, the middle of the range, they had the same sort of premises earlier where they kept all their cameras recording the whole time. A monkey stole the GoPro that Jimmy was holding. Like you see him take it out of his hand and like jump up into the rafters with it. But the GoPro is still recording. So they got the footage later of the GoPro like right in Monkey's face as he's running away from everybody, and like holding the GoPro away from them. And it's this like small moment that only takes up like 20 seconds, but it does kind of fit into a bunch of their philosophies of record everything, stay nimble, anything can be content, creativity saves money. They really did take this moment that could have been nothing, and because they had 10 cameras recording this monkey at all times, they were able to get some interesting, weird footage out of it that nobody else ever would.
Yeah, and it's so funny. That seems so random, right? And it's like, oh, like in the middle of this video, the monkey steals the camera. Like, who could have guessed that that would happen?
Or they held the GoPro up to the monkey and asked him to take it.
Well, not only that, but it is completely random. But I think that story, like just dissecting that video a little bit, one thing at the core of the videos that he hits on in the memo is this idea of progression, right? Of you start with an idea that grabs attention, and the idea is to make people watch till the end. And so if you know you're going from $1 to $100 to $100 million, well, you want to see what the $100 million one looks like, right?
Yeah.
And so the concept is that your attention will be held for the whole video. And then in the middle of that, of what actually makes that video interesting, it was this random little tidbit of a monkey stealing a camera. But I would say that wasn't even an accident because, like you said, the cameras are always rolling. And so you have this core concept, the skeleton of it is meant to keep your engagement the whole time. Because there are these little quote unquote random spurts in every video of something fun, something genuine, something that just happened to be caught on camera. But the organization and the way that they capture content is meant to capture that serendipity. It's meant for there to be random events all the time. And so it feels fun when you're watching because it is genuine. It's not scripted. It's not the way it was supposed to go. Like the randomness is engineered, which it's a paradox, but if you watch the videos, it's true.
I think I have a really clear moment as well of randomness being engineered. One of the other bullet points or sections in the memo is about brand deals that he turns into content. So another one of the videos I watched was him and a bunch of his buddies spent like a week or something in an underground cave. And they were exploring a bunch of different passages in the cave. And then in a clip in like the dead center of the video, they're exploring a cave allegedly with no knowledge of what's coming up. And then you see him and a bunch of these other content creators that he works with start like screaming and like being totally surprised at what's in front of them, and their eyes light up and all of that. And what's in the middle of this cave is a Zaxby's. Do you know what a Zaxby's is? It's a really well-known fast food chain, really popular in like the south and southeast of the US. So they had constructed a fast food operation in the middle of the cave. And then all of them walked in and were like, oh my God, what's going on here? And that was obviously a brand deal that I'm sure they were paid millions of dollars for. And then they turned it into a bunch of content where they're like, oh, I haven't eaten in days, and now I get this fried chicken. Oh my God, it's a Beast Burger at Zaxby's. I just thought it's so interesting how he's always looking to make that normal content engaging and random and trying to find ways to make it more interesting to the viewer, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, you find snippets of it, and we said it before, like, this memo is unorganized in a way where there's just some really repetitive elements. And I think always making sure that you can try to spin something into something fun and engaging is at the core. There's one quote where it says, if something goes wrong on shoot, always check to see if it can be made into content. A tree fall on your car and breaks the 100 vases we needed to give away. That's hilarious, and we should mention it in the video. And yeah, I mean, can this be leveraged into something engaging? Something that is the authentic wow factor that makes people want to watch more videos. And so I think that's where it goes from machinery into brand. Of you have the machinery that's made to grab content, and that you have the machinery that's made to grab eyeballs. And then you have the little moments in that in between that make people subscribe and continue to watch, which feeds back into the virality. It's really interesting.
Yeah, absolutely.
Also, the word virality in this context is so interesting because I think it's actually hijacked. I don't know if it's virality the way that I would traditionally think of virality.
Oh, I guess I hadn't thought about that. Yeah, he does kind of use it to just mean like popular, right? Or like intense.
He uses it as a means of spreading, but The way I would think of virality...
Thinks of it as a virus.
Yeah, a virus, but it's actually hijacking YouTube's algorithm. It's not virality the way, like, when I think of virality, it's like, okay, like, Alex gives me the cold and he gives it to 3 other of our friends. And then each of us spread it to 4 more people. And then it goes outwards from there. That's traditional virality. But what he's doing, it seems different because it's all about the algorithm. It's not about word of mouth or spreading from person to person.
That's true. He's doing it backwards. He's fitting the content of his videos to what the algorithm needs it to be to hit the most amount of people.
It's almost like he's hijacked a central nervous system.
Yeah, you reverse engineered to get his content to shown to the most people the most amount of time.
It is virality in a way, but it's not intuitive. I would need to think about it more, but it strikes me as something that's slightly different.
No, you're right. I hadn't thought about that. He wrote the word virality about 100 times in there, and I didn't realize.
Is it enough where you just believe it's true?
No, that's absolutely. I read it and just like, oh, I guess that's the definition of virality.
Well, because you think of it of like, oh, that's how videos have been spread in the past. There's a video of a cat or a guy with a really high-pitched voice in a pool, and I think that's funny, so I'm going to tell Alex about it, and he's going to go watch it, and then Alex is going to tell 3 other people about it. That's how YouTube started. But then once you get to a critical enough mass where something has gone viral, then you cross over into something else entirely where you've hijacked the central nervous system and then it spreads it for you. I would argue this is going to be controversial. Are MrBeast's videos even viral anymore? Or did he use virality to get to critical mass, and now he has enough critical mass where he doesn't need to go viral anymore? The YouTube algorithms do it for him.
When you say going viral, do you mean?
Of what we talked about the first time, right? Like, of how did he get to the critical mass where YouTube's recommendation algorithm was pushing him? He needed to go word of mouth. He needed people to recommend his video.
Well, I think he still follows that same formula. Right? Like, I think he's still producing the same types of videos that he wanted to. I guess he has more money now to produce better quality, but it's the same types of videos and the same formatting as when he was giving away smaller amounts of money or producing smaller competitions, things like that, right?
I would argue that if I had to guess, and I'm not a YouTube expert, maybe we can get Jimmy on the show. I would argue that the virality at this point probably acts more as an accelerant. But the core of what makes every video a success is the user base. So the power isn't virality at this point, it's existing scale. And that subscriber base is really what makes MrBeast productions defensible. And you need to keep the virality going forward. Like, it will start to atrophy if you're not focusing on virality as a core concept, as an accelerant.
Maybe I don't know enough of his videos to declare this, but I don't think they've changed drastically in the last 2 or 3 years. I think he's kept up similar content and similar levels of enthusiasm and all of that, right?
There are like core themes, but he does a really good job ideating new formats in ways that I think other people, where you see them kind of, I don't want to say get lucky, but when something goes viral that you did not intentionally engineer to go viral, if you spend enough time online, like, you'll find these of like, oh God, what's one? I'm trying to think of like a recent one that's been going on Reels without sounding like an old man. Oh God, I said Reels already. I need TikTok.
You're watching TikTok.
Yeah, so there I was watching TikTok. But like a format of, you know, a meme, one meme that goes viral and is spread around, and maybe an account can take advantage of being known for doing that format. MrBeast will be able to take advantage of one format, but these formats have a half-life. They deteriorate quickly. And so you always need to be finding the next one. And so if you're reliant on a certain type of format, like, I would argue that the giveaways are not a format, but rather an ingredient.
Yeah. Yes. So speaking of that, do you want to go through some of their, he has a whole section on formatting as well. Do you want to dig into that a bit?
Yeah. So an example of a format, he gives us some good examples of formats. He brings up his Last to Leave series. You have a payoff at the end. You're the last to stay in the circle, keep your hand on the car. And
you hand on a private jet that he bought, and then you win the private jet.
Yeah. And so if you stay to the end, then you win it. And he's done that multiple times, but that's not the only thing he relies on. Giveaways might be at the core, but the last to leave content is just one way of getting about to that giveaway. Mm-hmm. It's like he is ad hoc creating these like nifty game shows, but he gets to throw them out every few months and create a new quote unquote game show concept that is different and new every time.
Yeah. There's a quote down here that I really like as well. Yeah. He's talking about one of his other video formats where they were donating $10,000 to different Twitch streamers. So Twitch is a separate website where people stream themselves live doing an activity like playing video games. So separately, MrBeast will have people recording him going onto a computer and then donating $10,000 to a streamer and watch them react to it live. And then he goes and does it to a bunch of other streamers. And again, his videos make millions and millions of dollars. So he can easily give away $100,000 a video and have it not be a problem. So for him, it's almost like an easy way to get really good content. But then he says he only did about 12 of those videos because even though people begged for more and more of those types of videos, as Steve Jobs says, people don't know what they want. They need to be told what they want and given things that they're going to want.
Yeah, I mean, never ride a format until it's dead, because by definition, if you put out a video when it's already dead, I mean, in his mind, you've just wasted $1 million. It takes $1 million to do one of these videos, and so...
But he does the opposite when it comes to an individual video. When it comes to individual video, he'll take 2 or 3 minutes of content and make it 15 or 20 minutes long. It's this weird dichotomy where on a small scale, he has no problem milking content if people are still watching it, even if they're not necessarily enjoying it. But on a large scale, he's not going to do that for 20 videos in a row.
Yeah, well, it is a very specific formula of grab the attention at the beginning. I mean, he touches on this in terms of the metrics of how to basically game the metrics to get the most out of the YouTube algorithm. And it's grab attention early, have it be compelling enough where you stick around. And then statistically, if you stick around past like 3 minutes or whatever, you're invested. You're more likely to stay to the end and see what the payoff is at the end of the video, even if the core concept itself was the most interesting part of the video. And then I love this part. He has a quote at the end. He's like, we need to make the ending of videos abrupt so that people don't think like, all right, we're winding down, because you want to retain them to the end. And so the whole thing is meant like, watch the highest percentage of our video, watch it in the beginning, stick around. Not one single one of those metrics directly is related to enjoying the video.
I have, there's one really funny quote that he has, like kind of somewhere in the middle. Quote, in general, once you have someone for 6 minutes and they are super invested in the story and probably in what I call a lull, they are watching the video without realizing they are watching a video. Typically, the not as good content would be in the back half of the video, end quote.
Yeah.
They're in a lull, which is like so funny to put it that way, so bluntly, and be like, yeah, like our goal is to make them interested and have fun for the first couple minutes, and then just kind of stick around and watch to the end.
I mean, it's this concept in social media that is called the trance of once you've started engaging with a given stream of content, as long as that content continues and it is deemed by whatever our brains decide are interesting enough, you can just keep going.
It's so funny. I hadn't thought about that before. And then I read this, I watched a couple of videos, kind of flip back and forth, and I realized, oh my God, after one of the videos I watched, I think it was the Underground Cave one, and it gets snapped out of it until I saw the Zaxby's brand deal. I was like, oh my God, what am I doing here? Like now I'm watching this commercial at Zaxby's in Underground Cave. Yeah, like I totally got trapped in the trance. I didn't recognize it until I was halfway through a 20-minute video. It's just so funny.
Yeah. I mean, what it really is you feel committed to something. So I mean, you're already paying attention. You might as well see how it ends. And then the thumbnails and the concepts are designed to be catchy enough where you're like, ooh, but that looks interesting.
Yeah.
Well, maybe I'll just check out the first 3 minutes. And then you're watching the first 3 minutes and you're like, well, I might as well see how it ends. And then the cycle continues.
Oh, man. Anything else about format?
Nothing about format. The understand culture point. Did you hit on that section?
Yeah, what do you think about that? I'll pull it back up.
I thought it was interesting. This idea that you are a function of your information diet. And so he goes into an example of this guy, Chris Tyson, who he just describes as insanely funny, never understand how good he is at just being hilarious and just being exactly on the money. And then basically goes through explaining the type of content that this guy himself consumes. And basically points to this core idea of, listen, you're going to watch a lot of content, and then what you produce will be a function of that content that you've already ingested. Thinking about this playing out at scale. If we keep producing dumb content and then ingesting dumb content, then we will therefore produce more dumb content and ingest more dumb content ourselves.
Yeah. So when my brother was really young, he loves SpongeBob. And it sounds like this guy, same thing as this guy that MrBeast described. My brother would watch SpongeBob for a few hours and then start quoting SpongeBob and acting like SpongeBob. So my mom would ask him what he wants for dinner, and he would throw his plate in the air and run around the room and run into a wall. Something like that. Like just totally acting like a cartoon character. I totally understand what he's saying by this. And MrBeast talks about the information diet. Like, yeah, like what you consume, it ends up being what you sound like and what jokes you make and what creativity you have. So interesting.
The man then turns around and buries himself alive for 50 hours.
Yeah.
Like, it's like, make sure you have a very balanced, like, information diet. Also, I buried myself alive for 50 hours. Isn't that so interesting? Which, like, yeah,
But that's what he sees as interesting and fun and funny, and clearly it works.
Yeah. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what to take away from that. I don't know if there's a moral to that story.
I mean, inherently, it leaves the morals behind. This is what we started at. Like, I am impressed by what he's created. Mm-hmm. It's far more intentional than it looks on the surface. Mm-hmm. It is by definition the best in the world at being exactly what it is, because it has knocked it out of the park on the metrics. And there's not a value judgment in there, because do I actually like the content? No, I actually don't watch the content. Am I impressed by what he's done? Absolutely. Impressed in a good way? I'm still trying to figure that out.
Yeah. And the one thing I do want to note in here as well is just that he, like, again, I don't know how to put a moral judgment on the content he's made, but from a philanthropic point, he's done so many giveaways to so many people that need money.
Oh yeah, out of the goodness of his heart.
And that's the thing, right? Like, it's not, but it is a byproduct. Like, it's a byproduct. That's what it is in biology, when you have something that accidentally pops out of the chemical reaction. Not accidentally, but as a result of making viral content, those Twitch streamers ended up with an extra $10,000, or a man on the street gets an extra $10,000. Like, you get all these people getting extra money and job creation and all this other junk as a byproduct of him building a gigantic internet-based business.
It's actually incredible what he's done. He's been able to take the feeling of feeling good from philanthropy and figured out a way to distribute that to his subscribers. It's
monetized philanthropy.
And that's the thing. It's like, he's actually not directly monetizing the philanthropy. Any money that he gets from those videos, he claims, and honestly I would believe it, that he donates that back to charity. Mm-hmm. But the inherent byproduct of that cycle is branding, because you feel a lot differently about him giving away an island to some random person if you know that he also planted 20 million trees, and you're like, oh, well, He also does good stuff like give away trees. So like it justifies the entire ecosystem.
Yeah. He had one video where he gave away, I don't know what the right terms for all this is, but I guess he bought 100 dogs from kill shelters and gave them away to people who were looking for dogs. And like, he has the money where he could put up billboards and internet ads to draw hundreds of people to this event so that 100 dogs get adopted out. Whereas a normal shelter can take months to adopt out 100 dogs, and therefore kill shelters, they end up killing the dogs. Better example maybe is another video. He dug 100 wells in Africa, and like not nobody does this, but inexpensive, like arduous, very much in the weeds process. You can't just like easily hire an American company to go over there and dig wells. So that was a huge amount of work, but it actually has a real impact on people's lives at the end of the day.
Yeah, and I do think it's interesting because you take this machinery that he's built to do like these wacky videos of like stuff that sounds outlandish at scale, that this organization, because of what he stresses, is uniquely able to do, right? Of, hey, we're going to make the world's biggest pizza. Like the skills that you get from figuring out how to make the world's largest pizza, I would argue also helps you go dig 100 wells in Africa. And it's awesome that you can use one to help like fuel the other. Mm-hmm. But the skeptical part of me takes a step back and goes, okay, but like, what's the ultimate goal of the philanthropic side of the organization? And in my mind, it really comes down to branding, not, this really altruistic desire to, he doesn't dedicate himself really to any one specific type of charity. It is across the board. And I'm sure it's stuff he cares about, but the end goal for the organization is branding.
Yeah, 100%. I just Googled MrBeast digs wells, and yeah, it was November 2023. Dug 100 wells in Africa, providing clean drinking water for up to 500,000 people in, I think it was like 5 different countries. I don't know how to interpret that. Because yeah, then on the flip side, he is then turning around and using that to build his brand and make videos in 10 different languages to make money. Such an interesting process, like the whole machine.
Yeah. I think that's a good segue into, I think, what'll be a very good kind of closing thought and tying the ribbon over MrBeast going forward, right? But I think at the core and why this memo exists, what comes next is, okay, you're at 500 people. Can this thing scale to 5,000? And can you keep the magic alive in this decentralized organization? Is it an arbiter of things to come? Or do you need to continue just trying to get more out of those 500 people? And if you try to make this thing bigger, it's going to break. And it's actually what he ends the memo with, is the chapter 4 section. It's just 2 paragraphs on your career. Because if you're ambitious and want to dedicate your life to work, you picked the best company in America to do it at. I really don't care to hoard a bunch of money, and I deeply believe in rewarding the people that help this business get where it needs to be. And so he then goes on to say, hey, this is how we're going to be thinking about growing. We need the right people. There's so much opportunity for you to grow here, and you don't need to do things for 5 years to get a promotion. This is somewhere where you can rise quickly. This can be your future. And I think this is what younger generations tend to value in a workplace. Let's do bull and bear case for MrBeast videos going forward.
I'll start with saying there's so many more ways in which this could go wrong than it could go right. This is my general take.
Okay, so I think that's an interesting point. There's so many ways this can go wrong, more than it can go right. What is the biggest weakness of the organization at this point? The biggest risk to MrBeast Productions? And it's right in the name. It's MrBeast. This is a 500-person company that's in reality a one-man show.
That's going to prevent it from growing beyond a certain scale. Is that where you're going with this?
No, I actually think to the downside, that is the biggest potential risk of, you've put the ethos of this man at the center of this organization. The fallibility of this one guy could sink this organization tomorrow. There's a random allegation that came out within the last week around crypto insider trading, and I haven't dug in enough to that to know whether it's true or not. But imagine a world where he actually did scam people out of hundreds of millions of dollars because of crypto for whatever reason. This organization would cease to exist like tomorrow, which is wild because it has over 300 million subscribers, and it would just
Go away.
the continuation of this company has one person at the center, and that's insanely risky in a way that I can't really point at another company that would operate like that.
Yeah. No, and I think I'm going the same route in terms of legal liabilities or personal liabilities being the biggest risk. And I'm hoping that my view isn't skewed too much from the last month or 2 months of allegations that have come out against the company. But I'm struggling to see a world in which this grows beyond 1,000 people and everyone's self acting independently without a real hierarchical structure and best practices. And I guess maybe that does kind of feed into the legal liabilities as well. Like eventually you're going to get sued by contractors, rightly or wrongly. And if you don't have best practices and you just have people who are starting their careers in their early 20s, hiring and firing contractors left and right, you're probably going to like screw things up and waste more time trying to fix those screw ups at some point. Maybe that's still easy enough to control when you have 500 employees, but if you have 5,000, I don't know. You have a lot more experience with startups. I'm curious what your take is on that.
I think my bull case for this company looks a little different than it currently looks. And at scale, it looks a little bit more like the business model of a talent agency than a media company, than a traditional media company, if that makes sense.
Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah. Basically that you are not attaching your branding to any one creator, but rather you expand the media empire by productizing some of the central things of, figuring out why MrBeast production works and taking that process power and bringing it to other creators and then letting them go and expand on their own, almost like a franchise model, and taking a cut of basically their future earnings.
Do you keep the Beast branding or like some generic branding, or do you try to popularize those individual creators, or how are you thinking about this? Or not even have like faces in the video kind of thing, or how are you conceptualizing this?
Just backed by Beast Productions. Because, and I'll say, like, it's funny, you look at it now, what is MrBeast like doing beyond just videos? How is he getting more scalability out of himself? He's building distribution channels, and
he's going totally.
Oh my God, he's got the new Lunchables and MrBeast Burger, but he's creating all of these distribution partnerships that, at scale, if he's able to leverage his current brand into building the types of relationships with other distribution channels and branding in other downstream businesses off of the core of a successful YouTube business, you will be able to plug other creators into that network and immediately be able to take advantage of that distribution advantage.
Yeah, I'll be honest, when we were talking about bull cases, I was thinking of primarily the YouTube stuff, but I forgot he has started to build out all those distribution channels for food and I feel like one or two other just like generic products.
I mean, YouTube's at the core, right?
But yeah, I think, and maybe I'm wrong about this, I think I would guess at some point your YouTube views start to stagnate. Even if you're the biggest creator in the world, you can't keep growing exponentially forever. There's only so many people in the world and views to hit.
And there's only so many hours in the day. I promised I would bring up this quote. It comes from Reid Hoffman, CEO of Netflix. And when Netflix considers who they're competing with, they actually don't care about the other streaming platforms. Reid Hoffman, it was a few years ago, I think it was 2017, sent a quarterly letter that at the time he considered one of Netflix's biggest competitors to be Fortnite. And the biggest competitor was sleep, and that Netflix was winning. And the idea there is, listen, you can sign up for multiple streaming providers, What we really want at the end of the day is for you to spend more hours on our platform. And so therefore, we're competing with the fact that people have a finite amount of hours to spend on things. And so when you stay up late and watch another YouTube video or another Netflix video, that's that platform winning against competitors. And that competitor is a competing source for your attention. That's the attention economy. And that's at the core of what MrBeast is going after here. And I guess the true bear case is even if you have other content producers, there's only so many hours in the day that you can milk eyeballs.
Yeah, I guess do you have anything else to say on that?
Nothing that won't make you sad.
Anything else to say about him in general?
Jimmy, if you're listening to this and you have any examples on how to make Alex go viral.
But I don't want to do that. That's the thing. Like, this is where I keep coming back to. Like, I also recognize I'm speaking from like a really privileged view in like a bunch of different ways, but I don't want people just to like listen to my content because they forget to like close the window or something like because they're in a trance. At the same time, nobody's doing that right now. So that's not even really a concern from my perspective. I'm not going to accidentally go viral and accidentally cause people to do this.
Well, this is the bear case for humanity. It's like you're doing the right thing, trying to create content that's actually engaging. You want to be thoughtful. You want to wake people up, and you're still competing on the same metric, which is it's the attention economy.
Right. You're still, whether I like it or not, I'm competing against the same stuff.
Exactly. And it's been mechanized against you, the algorithms, so that if you're not playing the game, there's only so much oxygen in the room, and they're actively trying to extinguish any other competitor for attention. The parallel I would point to is, you could have charitable organizations that are trying to do really well in the world, and if you have more dollars behind evil corporations lobbying in their own self-interest, you will lose. Or you are likely to lose. The odds are stacked against you. That's really dark. Maybe we don't include that.
That's all right.
All right. One final question. Alex, would you ever work for MrBeast in MrBeast Productions?
I hope that I would have the confidence to say no if that opportunity ever presented itself.
He left the door open just a little bit there.
Right, but that's the thing, right? Like, you can't say no for sure until you actually get presented with that option, and then you say no.
Yeah.
So it is also very context dependent, in my opinion. Context dependent on what the trade-off is, how not even how much money and popularity can I gain, but what's the trade-off in terms of like being able to do well with my own content versus just hyping up and helping him make his current stuff a little bit better.
Is it worth sacrificing individuality to feed the machine? And the answer that I hear from you is no.
But right, and I'm saying no, but clearly everyone else who's ever worked on his videos and every other giant content creator feels differently. So am I really 1 in a million, or am I just saying that because I haven't gotten there and had that opportunity yet? And I don't know what the answer to that is.
There's a little bit of survivorship bias in that too, of the ones that you see at the largest scales are the ones that said, hell yeah, Jimmy, show me to the promised land. I mean, I'd argue that it's not even MrBeast that is the ultimate arbiter here. It is, we said it at the top, it's the YouTube algorithm.
Yeah.
And the YouTube algorithm is a function of us, our eyeballs, what we pay attention to. We've built our own house. It's
yeah, that's true. None of us are perfect. Like I go on YouTube all the time, and I'm sure I watch stuff that makes the algorithm worse for everyone just by virtue of whatever I fall into a trance when I'm watching.
It was meant to optimize for one thing, and it does a very good job at it.
Yeah.
And I think MrBeast is a function of that, and whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, that's a value judgment. And I've tried to stay away from that.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Just like MrBeast, we're going to have an abrupt end to this episode so that we get the maximum view percentage.
Yeah, cut it here. Keep the retention high.